I'm delighted to say with me in the studio now, the great Paul Simon. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
How are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
Your own new album, first album in quite a while, 5 years, is it, something like that?
That's 4.
Is it 4
It's
and a bit?
usually
Yeah.
about 4.
Yeah. I suppose there's quite a long gestation period for any album.
I mean, I always feel like when people say, what took you so long? I always think, it's not a pizza order, I mean, it's that's how long it takes.
Stranger to Stranger, it's called. And am I right in thinking that it sort of all developed from just one little piece of instrumental music? That the basic idea started from there?
No, you're not entirely right. Yes, this particular album started with one piece of music, which became Insomniac's Lullaby. But really, the album is like an accumulation of everything that I've been doing, like since I'm 15 and I started to record.
It's a lifetime's experience.
Yeah, I think this is one of those summation albums where you use a lot of the information that you've acquired over the years, and also break into some new sound territory, like the Harry Partch microtonal music and
yeah. Now tell us a bit more about this, because you're using some very unusual instruments on this.
Harry Partch was a 20th century American composer who believed that an octave was not divided into 12 tones, the way you see a piano, but that the actual division was 43 distinct tones. So in order to compose this music that he heard in his head, he had to build instruments that had these microtonal intervals. And they have a very unusual and strange sound. And I used them on the song Insomniac's Lullaby, although you don't really get the full feeling of what it feels like to hear a Harry Partch piece, which is very strangely beautiful in a way that sounds almost like it's out of tune, but not really. It feels like a dream, a strange dream, which is why I used it with a song called Insomniac's Lullaby.
It's a beautiful song. We're going to play it a little bit later on, but I'd like to play first the single from the album, the first single from the album, Wristband. Can you just introduce us to that?
Wristband has a rhythm, a clapping rhythm that goes like chickadee, chickadee, chickadee. That rhythm, and the players were flamenco musicians, and they clapped, and they played a cajon, which is a box wooden drum, and they danced. And I was really interested in flamenco rhythms, not for flamenco music, which I happen to like, but I wasn't intending to make a flamenco album as my follow-up to my African, adventures of 30 years ago, but whatever. So, but I like the clapping, and I didn't know how I was going to use it, but so that's what you're hearing. You're hearing that clapping and an acoustic bass, and there's an electronic musician called he's Italian. His real name is D.G. Galasio, but he calls himself Clap Clap.
Yeah.
So he's on there a little bit too, and a couple of horns, and that's what the sound of it is. And after it's over, if you want to talk about the lyrics a bit, we can do that.
Right. Here it is.
Then you can't get through the door. No, you can't get through the door. No, you can't get through the door.
Wristband, Paul Simon, single from the album Stranger to Stranger. Paul was just talking there while that was playing about the influences that you've picked up over the years without even knowing it. Something has lodged in your mind years ago, and you think, maybe I can use that just in something that you might write years and years and years later.
I think we fall in love with certain sounds, particularly like from the age of like 12 to 15, when you can remember the lyrics to every song, and the sound and the moment that you liked it and all of that. That stuff is very clear in my memory. But other influences, like when I came to live in England in the 60s, like 64 and 65.
Yeah, well, you were obviously very strongly associated with England at that time and beyond. Incidentally, somebody called Chris here has written to say, has Paul heard those recordings he made in Essex back in 1964 in Brentwood Folk Club? They're only available to be heard in the Essex Records office in Chelmsford. They were made by my friend Dennis Rucard, then living in Brentwood. And he says they are still there. Apparently, your first recording made in the UK. Would that be right?
Well, I had no idea that they were recording it, but the Brentwood Folk Club was the first place that I played, because I was living with a family in Brentwood, and there was a club there, and I think that was the first place I played. I can't imagine what they sound like.
Well, get down to the Essex Records office in Chelmsford. They have them there.
I will. I'll get to hear them.
We were talking about wristband there. You mentioned about the lyric, So, what is the story behind that?
Well, the idea, the title, or the word wristband came to me as something that might be interesting, but I had no idea what to do with it. And I was I was having dinner with this friend of mine, a poet, Paul Muldoon. He's an Irish poet, and I said, I have this title wristband, but I don't know whether to keep it or not. And he said, no, you should keep that. That has a lot of potential for different meanings. So when I started to write the song, I just made up this story. It's not a true story, about a guy, just getting locked out, from the stage door. Now he's got to go back up to the front door where there's a, bouncer is standing there, and he won't let the guy from the band back in because he doesn't have a wristband. Then I started to think, well, what else does a wristband mean? And then I used it as a metaphor for permission to enter or be part of anything, and so the end of the record points out, the riots started slowly with the homeless and the lowly, then they spread into the heartland towns that never get a wristband, kids that can't afford the cool brand, whose anger is a shorthand for you'll never get a wristband, and if you don't have a wristband, you can't get through the door. So you're taking the word wristband and taking from the story, the kind of funny story, and turning it into a metaphor for being deprived of the opportunities that many people have because they're given a wristband.
And like most of your songs, the second time you hear it, the third time you hear it, you hear more. Not just melodically and musically, but in the lyrics, you take more from each song each time. I've had the opportunity to listen to the album a couple of times now.
Right. Well,
and you hear more each time.
I have to hope that people are attracted to it enough the first time to go and listen to it two or three times.
Yeah, that's important, isn't it?
It's
to get
crucial.
That initial.
It's crucial, because if you don't like it on the first time, you're not going to listen to it a second or third time. So it doesn't matter. So I do think a lot about attention span and about just how attractive is a thing when you first hear it. When I was younger and when I was kind of effortlessly making hits, that came naturally to me. And as the songwriting, developed and became more complex, I became less interested in writing those kind of hooks that keep getting repeated, that are, essential part of what makes a hit. I was more interested in whatever it was that I was thinking about than I was about writing the hook. So the songs became, in a way, more interesting to me, but the hits became, less and less so, which I think is a kind of a natural way to go anyway. As you age, you don't want to keep.
You're not so keen on instant success.
Yeah, you don't want to pretend that you're part of a generation that you're not part of.
exactly. The whole other thing about the album is that the musical themes run through it. I mean, you take parts of one track and they are kind of laced through the album in other tracks. It's a very good kind of golden thread through the whole thing, I think.
Thank you. Well, yes, I do. I do take parts of the rhythms of tracks and use them again. Like Wristband comes from the rhythm and the bass part of the Riverbank. A certain section, the first chorus of the Riverbank, has the same clap and the same bass line, except I sped it up and changed the key, which you can do with digitally. You can do that, but otherwise it's the same. But it sounds completely different when you take it out of the context of the other instruments and you leave it there and you write a separate song on it. But what happens as far as an album goes is you're recapitulating themes and sounds. So the album has, the album has a unity of sound, and I think that this album has that because it doesn't have a particular lyrical theme that goes through it. It's sort of just stuff that's on my mind, and my mind keeps wandering. So I have no particular point that I'm making lyrically, but musically, it has a sound that I think is unified.
Well, let's listen to Insomniac's Lullaby, which we've talked about.
Soft as a rose, the light from the east, as if all is forgiven and wolves become sheep. We are who we are, or we're not, but at least we'll eventually all fall asleep.
I do love that song. I think it's fantastic.
I'm glad you do.
And Paul, we could hear the microtonal instruments. We may not have known exactly what we were hearing, but they were involved in that.
Yeah, they're there, and that high flute sounding is really Bobby McFerrin's voice.
Well,
so he's singing.
He has
Bobby McFerrin's on
such a great
on
singer.
there, and Jack DeJohnette is playing cymbals, and the keyboard player who is playing. He's in my band. His name is Mick Rossi. He's also a composer, but he plays with Philip Glass. So it's very, very good. Really, really great players, to add.
And you love playing with great players. I mean, it's not. There's no hint
of course. Yeah, it's a thrill.
Looking at your other songs, because we've been playing Disturbed's version of Sound of Silence in the last week, been a big response to it.
I just saw them play live on U.S. television, and I was very impressed. I thought that vocalist did a really powerful, dramatic version of the song. In fact, I wrote to him. I got an email and I wrote and said, "Yeah, I saw your performance and I thought you really brought something to the song." And I've heard a lot of versions of that song, and that's really good and very different from the way I do it, but still made the song have a fresh meaning.
Some people say that songwriters say that the songs are like children, that you're very protective of them for a long time, but then you have to let them go in their own way and let other people fall in love with them. And is this very much the same in this case?
I don't feel that way. I don't feel they're like children. Like let's take my children, for example. I mean, no, I guess you do have to let them go after a while, but I wouldn't let the other people I play with them around.
Yeah, you wouldn't let them mess them around, but you don't mind the falling in love. Yeah?
As far as the songs go, the truth is that every once in a great while, somebody will make a cover version of a song that's as good or better than what you do. But most of the time they miss it for whatever the reason is. Usually rhythm.
Yeah. But in this case,
but the Disturbed, and I don't know them, so but I'd be curious to know how they even chose it.
That is an interesting point, isn't it? Because it's not their normal area at all. No.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Paul. Lovely to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. Paul Simon, Stranger to Stranger is the album.